Welcome to another Awareness to Action Enneagram podcast. My name is Creek, and I'm with my contumacious co-host, María, Sikora, and María José Munita. This word is brought to you by Joel, our very own Joel. Yes, he sent it to me yesterday.
Ever use it in English, that word?
I've never heard that word before.
Yeah, because if I translate it into Spanish, it's like stubborn or something like that. Is that what you mean?
Stubbornly or willfully disobedient to authority.
Mm-hmm.
So spell it?
Contumacious.
Okay, that's a new one on me.
Contumacious.
You say that word in Spanish to somebody who just doesn't obey at all. Or it's not only stubborn, but
willfully.
Stupid a bit. But anyway.
So if you had a coaching client that was stubborn, how would you... María, for those that aren't watching, María just slapped her client. So speaking of stubborn people, that sounds like someone that may need some coaching. And as some of our listeners know, we've just gotten through a series on coaching the 9 types. And so maybe we should address what is your philosophy of coaching? How do you set yourselves apart in the coaching space? María José.
No.
Speaking of contemptuous or whatever that word is, right?
Contumacious.
Contumacious, okay. Yeah, so look, I've been coaching people for 30 years now in organizations because I'm very old. And when I first started, you didn't have things like ICF and the International Coach Federation. It really wasn't an established industry. There were executive coaches, but it was pretty small. And since then, a lot of rules have developed on what's the right way to be a coach in particular environments. And you have to understand that there's all kinds of coaching, right? People, not only different approaches to it, but different kinds of coaching, right? There's life coaching, for example, which is not what we do. And that's usually people who pay somebody, kind of privately out of their own pocket to get coaching about how to live their lives. It's, I guess, similar to therapy in a way, but not by a licensed therapist usually. So that's one thing, but what we do is executive coaching. So we work mostly with senior leaders in organizations, and our approach, the way I always go at this, way I always talk to a client is my job is to just help you find ways to get better at what you do. Okay. So I start off with what are their strengths? What things do they need to develop? What things do they need to develop to be successful, more successful in the role they're currently in or in future roles that they want to have so they can start developing those skills in advance, okay? So I never know what that's going to look like when I start an engagement, and I always tell people that, which is why we do 360 assessments. I used to think early on that, all I have to do is know somebody's Enneagram type and I know what they need. That's not true, right? I mean, because sometimes people need things that don't seem to be intuitive related to their Enneagram type for a variety of reasons, right? You might have a 9 who's too aggressive, too angry when they lead people. You might have an 8 who's too passive, and again, this doesn't fit the stereotypes, but it fits the reality, which is why you have to find feedback. So we do use the Enneagram as a big part of that. It helps us frame, the work that we do with the individual. It helps us understand their, what obstacles they put in their own way, but it's not enough in and of itself. Okay. Go ahead, María José.
Yeah, I was going to say that, so our business is called Awareness to Action, and we follow that kind of process from awareness to action. We use the Enneagram many times as a tool for awareness, to articulate what's going on, to understand and make sense of the client. And then we, as you were saying, try to help them remove the obstacles that they put themselves in their own way, and then take action.
Yeah.
so that they grow, they develop skills, or and they become more effective. So it's very action oriented, but not only action. It's not just changing behavior. It starts from awareness and then removing the obstacles and take action.
Yeah. So there are some times when it's just, you know what, stop doing this and start doing that, right? It's just a simple behavioral change that they need to
Stop
Yeah,
it.
just stop it. Will you? And, because sometimes people just don't know, right? They just don't know, oh, I'm supposed to do that, or, oh, I didn't realize I was doing that. And so sometimes you can just say, hey, stop this, start that, and everything's fine. It's when they start running into the obstacles that, okay, yeah, I get that in my head, that I should start this and stop that, but they can't actually make it happen. This is where the Enneagram becomes useful, right? Because it helps us identify the internal narratives that people have that keep them stuck in their own behaviors. And usually they're stuck in their own behaviors because of some fear of loss. Right. And this is the thing we're always trying to expose in our clients is what is it you're afraid of losing that you're not even aware you're afraid of losing, or you're not aware of how it is keeping you from changing. And so we go from awareness to action in that case. But it is very much about self-awareness, understanding ourselves, understanding our narratives, and moving forward. Now, we get a lot of people who are coaches who come to our certification program, and often they have had other kinds of training, and they've been given all these different tools, right? Either Enneagram-related tools, or just all sorts of assessments and tools in general. Our approach is to kind of, only use as few tools as possible. We don't use, we have a lot of tools in our toolkit, but we try to use as few as possible because we're always looking for what's the minimum effective dose in order to help people grow, what's the minimum effective intervention to help them grow. But the other thing we have noticed in working with lots of people is that, preservers, navigators, and transmitters all tend to coach differently, and they have different sort of inherent strengths and potential vulnerabilities that it's helpful to understand.
There are some other things. That's how we do it. And I think what's implicit there is that we need to build rapport with clients, make them feel at ease with us, trust us. And those things are not always easy. We want them to trust that we can help them, trust that we will not share what they say to us, support them, but also challenge them. So those are things that we have to do in order to succeed at the coaching engagement.
I'm curious, what does building rapport look like for each of the instinctual biases? Like if, a transmitter or preserver want to develop more skills in building rapport, like what would that look like?
Building rapport is always about focusing on the other person and not being trapped in your own worldview. Right. One of the things that gets in the way of building rapport related to the instinctual biases is that, we can fall into the trap. We can use us as an example of treating everybody like a navigator and assuming that the things they think are important or the things they think are interesting have to do with navigating. But what you have to understand is who the client is as an individual. Now, a big part of that is their instinctual bias. So when I am working with a transmitter, I just intentionally speak faster. Right. I amp it up a little bit. I'm more animated when I do it. And when I'm working with a preserver, I slow it down and I'm less animated because there are affective tones that each of the instinctual biases tends to display, which is one of the things how you notice them. So you want to match their affective tone, but you also want to treat them as human beings, right? And find out what their interests are and, what their family's like, what their background is, and look for commonalities. Okay, so building rapport is always about finding commonalities in some way that are legitimate. Right? It's not just, oh, I love that movie too, kind of thing if you don't love that movie. But it's, but it's also, again, understanding who they are from the perspective of the instinctual bias, the perspective of their type, and the perspective of just general humanity that you want to match. I'll say another thing that I think we do that surprises a lot of people that go through our training programs is that, number one, we can be fairly directive, right? A lot of times coaches will say, oh, you're never supposed to tell anybody what to do. You're supposed to help them figure out the answer. A lot of times, particularly with the people we work with, they just want you to tell them what to do, right? It's like, look, let's just cut to the chase here. Help me out, right? What do I need to do? And of course, we have to be careful. We do want to teach people to fish rather than just give them fish, because another one of our, principles in the work that we do is limited engagements, right? I mean, I've got some clients that I've worked with for years, but most of them, it's like after 6 to 9 months, we're done. Okay, it's because otherwise I'm just milking you. And any coaching engagement, most coaching engagements, I'll say, reach a point of diminishing returns. And that's the last thing you want, because you've done all the work with the client, either that they're interested in or capable of doing at this point. And so you just kind of have to, say, fly birdie, go off and do your thing. And if you need me, call me, but I'm not going to track you down. So we package our services that way, right? So it's a closed engagement. You pay me this, you get that. And when we've reached the end there, you go do your thing. Last thing we want to do is, kind of give people the impression that we're milking them. Or for me, I just get bored after a while, right?
Me too.
It's like, okay, I got nothing else to say to you, right? Just, go on. Yeah.
When I realize that I'm talking during a session about, just anything, right. Their lives, it's just that, my life. It's I'm done.
Time to move on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So it sounds like you say something like, if you need me, call me, no matter where you are, no matter how far. Because baby, there's ain't no mountain higher. Okay, I'm done. Ain't no valley low enough.
Creek, are you actually reaching into Motown here? Man, oh man. Wow.
I am.
You're a new man.
I watched Remember the Titans.
Oh, okay.
Well, let's get in a little bit more into the instinctual bias. And let's start with preserving.
Before we do that, can I just make one point here?
Sure.
Number one, I think it's really, really important before we talk about any of these that type is not destiny. Okay, none of this stuff is written in stone. We are talking about tendencies here, and there are things that I am good at that one might think, oh, well, a navigating 8 wouldn't be good at for, whatever reason, because it's not the stereotype. But I've learned, okay, I need to learn to do this in order to be good at my job. So, anything we're talking about here are tendencies rather than hard facts about people. Okay. So, Maria Jose, you want to talk about preserving coaches?
Why me?
No. Now, come on. We keep.
They're great. They're great.
We probably all really need preserving coaches.
I wanted to talk about navigating.
Well, okay, I'll tell you.
No, I'll do it. That's fine.
I will say, all of us getting into Claude, the amount of preserving that I have to do to get Claude to do the things that I want it to do, like the organization is just like, I thought I was going to be able to automate this preserving stuff away, but it's just creating more preserving stuff. So,
yeah, but
anyways.
Anyway, outsourcing.
I distract
a lot
Jose.
of preserving.
Yeah. Yes.
So preservers are kind of more structured, methodical. They tend to value kind of things to be orderly and how do you say it? It's you can anticipate what's coming. You know that they're dependable. So they tend to be, as Mario said, it's not like all preservers are the same way, but they tend to focus on the details and the structure more than others. And that makes them kind of dependable, also disciplined, and probably better at following through. So it's something that it's like, okay, you were going to do this, now you have to do that. These are the steps. They might value having some of these tools that Mario was talking about because it gives me something concrete to pay attention to or to work with. I think that they're probably consistent. So that creates kind of trust with the client. It's like, I'm going to call you this day. This is what's going to happen. These are the steps. And that's something that a lot of clients need. I can see a lot of my clients ask, like, what's coming now? What are the steps? What's this? And I'm like, who cares, But I know that it's important. And I do it. As Mario said, we have developed skills that they're not natural for us. But for preserving coaches, that's more natural to them.
Yeah.
Anything?
Yeah.
Any other strengths you can think of, Mario?
Yeah. So with the preserving coaches, I think that, again, they're going, like you said, they're going to be more structured. They're going to be more process oriented, and they're going to be better, certainly, than we are at helping their clients developing those preserving related skills, right? I mean, I always tell my clients, I remember years ago when I used to work with people that were more in the middle of the organization. And I would say, oh, what do you need to work on? And they'd say, well, I really need to work on my time management and, skills and that sort of thing. I was, well, you picked the wrong coach for that because, I mean, even though I'm pretty strict with my calendar and my time, that's just not my skill set, right? So that's not the kind of, I always tell people, don't come to me if you need coaching for finance and budgeting and, project management and those sort of things. I can do the basics, but I'm not the person for that. Preservers are much more likely to be the people for those sort of things. And it's a real strength. It can be a real strength. And again, this doesn't mean that preservers can't also focus on the navigating and, political dynamics of an organization or even self-promotion. We're just talking about the things that are going to be more natural to them.
Yeah, so there's some traps. Yeah. And too much structure can be rigid at times. And it might not allow them to see what's happening in the moment and go with the flow in a good way. So maybe that's what the client really needs. And again, here we're not saying, and you said, Mario, that we're going to repeat these 20 times, but that all preserving coaches will be rigid, but it could create some rigidity to be so structured. I've seen also coaches preserving coaches who don't take enough risks with a client and saying kind of stronger things, pushing them more, confronting them with the truth because they don't want to lose the client. So that risk aversion can be not good. I mean, for the client who might need to be pushed harder. Yeah. They, as coaches, as professionals, they might not sell themselves enough. Although I've seen that because of the need for financial security, they tend to be good at promoting their services, but not in a flashy thing,
Right.
in a flashy way, but in a more like disciplined way. But they do it, I think, more than navigators, at least. But kind of neglecting the transmitting domain might create some issues. Like if they are working with a transmitting client, as María said, where you need to just go faster, speed up, they might be too slow for a transmitting client, for example, or push their agenda. And this is something that we can all fall into, like talking about preserving stuff to clients whose issues are not related to it.
Yeah. I think it's really important here to understand the pattern of expression, right? And again, like we've said a million times in this podcast, our view is that there are only 3 instinctual profiles. There are not 6. And we know that other people teach that and talk about that and say that they know people, that don't fit the profiles we describe. They're wrong. It's just all there is to it. They're wrong. And we've been doing this for years, and we see these patterns over and over and over and over and over again. That's why we talk about a pattern of expression rather than a stack, because a stack, usually when people are talking about a stack, they're talking about some people's, internal perception of themselves, which, the Enneagram tells us is not always accurate, okay? But what we see is the data from people. And almost always, preservers are going to be a bit conflicted in the navigating domain. And so they might struggle to build rapport sometimes. Okay. They don't find, a lot of rapport building seems like chit chat. It seems like you're just asking questions that are random and that sort of thing. But what a navigator's doing there is they're really trying to understand the person. So they ask them about their hobbies. They ask them about where they grew up. They ask them about, their families and that sort of thing. And they're gathering this information for a reason. Okay. I'm getting a better picture of this person. Preservers might not do that as effectively as they should. So that's an area for growth for them. And like María José said, they, can really struggle with the transmitting stuff because that is the zone of indifference for preservers. They just don't feel comfortable promoting themselves. They don't see that it's that important. They think it's, uninteresting, etc. And they can, struggle to build their businesses that way if they're not promoting effectively. The other thing is, I think, María José, you made an important point, is that preservers might promote themselves very effectively, but it looks like a preserver promoting themselves. It doesn't look like a transmitter, and that's fine, right? Because we should always be on brand. Okay, we should always let people know what they're getting, but they're transmitting, when they do it, looks very different than the way a transmitter does.
Speaking of transmitters, what about coaches who are transmitters?
So coaches who are transmitters I'll take this one, María José, okay? Coaches who are transmitters have a lot of strengths, right? They can be charismatic and dynamic, and they can be inspirational to people. They're often really good at promoting themselves and selling themselves. They're really good at helping people, aim higher. Right. I always think of Tony Robbins, for example, as kind of the ultimate transmitting, coach. Be all you can be, awaken the giant within, all these sort of things that are big. And so the transmitters tend to be aspirational in a way that's, really important. And a lot of people need that. A lot of people resonate with that. And this is where their gift is. Okay, so that's not really the gift that we as navigators are going to have of, really inspiring people to be all they can be and that sort of thing. So a lot of real strengths on that side of it. Downside can be that they're making it about themselves very often. And one of the things that I have seen in transmitting coaches is that they are trying to help their clients become the coach's ideal of who they should be rather than the client's ideal of who they want to become. And in fact, I'll share a story. Very early in my coaching career, I had a client who had worked with a transmitting coach that I actually had done some work with. And the transmitting coach, he wasn't that great a coach. And, and he had this vision of who people should be, and he kept pushing them in that direction. And this client later at one point said to me, the difference between you and John was trying to get me to be him. You're trying to get me to be me. And, and that's what he was looking for, right? So that's a trap transmitters can fall into. And again, doesn't mean they always do, right? Doesn't, but that's one of the challenges.
Yeah, I think that another challenge is that they miss out on the context, not pay attention enough to the politics in the organization, who is around the client, what are the interpersonal dynamics, all of those things which are more natural to navigators. For transmitters, is their zone of indifference, and they tend to pay less attention to it, have it's not so natural for them to just pay attention and understand, make sense of it, and what's the impact. So those things are not taken care of many times.
Yeah. Transmitters can struggle to listen, and they will rarely admit this. And then they'll say, oh, I'm a great listener. And kind of our stock response to that is that transmitters are great listeners for about 30 seconds in general. And then they go into transmit mode, right? So they get this information that they need. Now, look, we can all do this, okay? We can all get impatient, and when we think we know where the person is going, we kind of jump in and speed them along and, these sort of things. But this is a real Achilles heel for transmitting coaches who haven't developed good listening skills, that they think they know what the client is thinking, and then they go into transmit mode and they transmit at the client or instruct the client or tell stories to the client instead of making sure they've sucked, every bit of information out of the person that they can before they go forward. So that's really something that transmitters need to watch for as coaches.
Yeah, and I've seen good coaches learning to listen.
Yeah.
I have a friend who used to write everything. She would never read it, but it was a way for her to not talk before the client would stop talking. So it can be managed, but it is an issue. It is a thing that you need to pay attention to.
Yeah, and it can really, when transmitting coaches understand that, it can really transform their practices, right? Not only from how the client feels about them, because look, every coaching client wants to be listened to, right? This is what, people just need to express themselves to somebody, right? So if the coach is not listening, they feel like, all right, I'm not getting something fundamental that I need here. But once a transmitting coach can really learn to listen, they can be really, really dynamite.
Yeah, I think that they can also be probably very direct and push clients towards like a vision, as you said. Now, the path to getting to that vision might be a bit boring. I mean, we see transmitters kind of thinking about this big vision and then, okay, we'll get there, So I'm sure that affects coaching as well if you don't pay attention to it.
Yeah. And that can be something that transmitters often struggle with, right? They can paint a big picture, but don't provide the scaffolding on how to actually create it. I've likened it to a tendency to think they're building a house when in reality they're just handing you a blueprint and, okay, so, where do I get the wood, right? Where do I buy the nails? How do I hammer these things together, et cetera? That they might not necessarily be as skilled at. That's preserving stuff, right? So again, with the transmitters, it can be hit or miss. And and that's a criticism I'll have of navigators as well, right? When we get there, is that they might, really struggle with some of the execution pieces of things.
And as you said, I envy their ability to sell themselves.
Yeah.
They're really good transmitting coaches. It's probably they're not so good transmitting coaches, but I think that they have a natural skill to just sell themselves, which I think is great.
Yeah, I will say, and that, we've touched on this, but I want to make sure we make the point here, is that their growth area is in the navigating domain, which is the zone of indifference for transmitters. And, Maria Jose made a comment about them not always understanding context. They might struggle to understand the politics of the organization as well. And I have seen that hinder them in their practice, not just their coaching work, but in the relationships that they build with organizations, right? Because if you're a coach and you do, multiple engagements with the same company, you really have to understand the company dynamics, right? You really have to understand, who do I go to get a purchase order signed? Who do I go to get on this person's calendar? Who's supporting my work that I need to leverage? Who's a detractor of my work that I need to win over or demonstrate my value to? All these sort of things. And transmitters, while they might do a bit of it, aggressively, they can think that they have it all figured out and then start missing all the shifting dynamics in the organization.
So with the few minutes we have left, do you guys want to talk about the navigating coaches?
The last thing that Mario said is, I think, what navigators are really good at, or tend to be good at. It's listening. I think that you listen, and you listen beyond the words more easily. It's the context and what's really happening, and asking more questions with kind of real curiosity to just understand what's going on and who else is involved and what's happening and what happened before and what's the impact on other areas. So all of that in relational map, navigators are trying to build it. So they ask questions that allows for them to build it. And there, it's like, especially when you're working with, as Mario said, with more than one person in the organization, it's very, very useful. We tend to do 360s and interview personally people around our client. That allows us to create that map, to understand the map of the people there and what the power dynamics are and what's happening and all of that. So that is what navigators, I think, are really good at, listening beyond the actual words.
Yeah. Most clients who come to a coach, particularly at more senior levels, are coming because of people issues, right? It's not because they're not managing their calendars well or, some of the preserving stuff. Those folks don't make it. If they don't learn how to do that stuff, they don't make it to vice president or general manager or something. And so most of the people that we encounter are dealing with interpersonal issues, the way they come across to people, the way they might not read signals well, not knowing how to effectively motivate their some of their subordinates. So just by the nature of what we do, and it's probably self-selecting to some extent, but a lot of what senior people are coming to coaches for are navigating things. And it's about understanding those dynamics, understanding the nuances, understanding why people do the things that they do, and being willing to gather information. So we've talked about how transmitters might, interrupt people and move on. Again, while we can all do that, I'm much more likely to just sit there and stare at somebody, right? Just, to the point where it can be a little unnerving to them that, because I just want them to talk more and I want them to feel a little bit uncomfortable. So they'll say that thing that they haven't said yet, that I feel like I need to know. Or I'll just say, that's interesting, tell me more, and force them to talk. I mean, that's kind of like, one of the bingo spaces for me, because that's how you get more information. You just say, tell me more, and they will. And that's when they tell you the good stuff, usually. So this is a strength that navigators have. There are some vulnerabilities, however. Right?
Yeah, and navigators might be kind of too willing to adapt and go with the flow and keep listening, which might get to sometimes not making enough progress, or not being methodical enough or structured enough, because it seems like too adaptable, So clients might have a hard time not knowing what's coming next and what are the steps and things like that. Sometimes, yeah.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, that sometimes it's hard to. I mean, you have so much empathy that it's hard to hold them accountable, because you understand why they didn't do it. It's just you just no, you would do the same or whatever. So it's hard to hold them accountable to the things they said they would do and when they would do it, because it's just not that important in our minds when it might be important for the growth of the client.
Yeah. I want to be careful there, because it's not that navigators have more empathy than preservers or transmitters do, although they are in general better people, but that's another issue. I just couldn't resist. That's not true. They have empathy towards specific things, and I think all the people of all the biases have empathy toward things related to those biases. So as I, like Maria Jose, if my client hasn't done their homework, for example, my approach is like, all right, you're an adult. It's not up to me to, hold your hand and that sort of thing. If you're not taking this seriously, that's all right. I'm still getting paid. So, I don't push them, or I might resist pushing them. I can also, sometimes I try to set up rules. Always follow up and respond within 48 hours. Always send people the things you say you're going to send them, by that end of that day, whatever. But sometimes they slip, right? Because the preserving domain, the process and structure stuff, is the zone of indifference for navigators. So instead of doing all that administrative minutia that it feels like to do these kind of follow-up things, navigators will just wander on to the next navigating opportunity, right, rather than sit down and do that detailed stuff. And again, we find that that's something that pretty much every navigator who ends up coming to one of our programs struggles with, is, doing the administrative stuff, paying the bills, filing the taxes, that sort of thing, doing the follow-ups, submitting invoices or, whatever. So
What does Lee call it? Like the navigating swirl or slushy or something?
Yeah, and it can be, right? I mean, it's, because again, it'll be there. I'll get to it, right? And this is how we always feel about the zone of indifference. All three of the instinctual biases, I'll get there. So preservers say, yeah, I'll get to all that promotional stuff. And transmitters say, yeah, I'll get to all that navigating stuff. So we all create our own different kinds of swirls, but we don't notice our own. We only notice the ones of, usually the swirl of the zone of indifference, because it irritates us more, because we think it's less important. So
I think it's really important to understand the instinctual bias of the client. And without losing kind of authenticity, and do what you're good at, but also adapting a bit to what they think it's important.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you might lose the client or lose their interest, or not have them focus completely on the engagement, because they get distracted by the things that you're not paying attention to that are important to them.
Yeah. look, this is the real value of understanding this stuff, right? A coaching engagement has to be about the client, not about the coach. It has to be what the client needs, not about what the coach thinks is important. So understanding the instinctual bias is so that we can understand the ways in which we get in our own way of doing that, right? And so we've always got to say, okay, this is what the client needs. I'm a navigator, and that means I might fall into the trap of not meeting the client's needs in these specific ways. So I've got to make sure I do that. Okay. So it's not to just say, oh, well, you hired the wrong coach, dummy. You should have hired a, preserver or a transmitter or whatever. No, if you take on the engagement, you need to have the requisite skills in all of the areas to meet the client's need. And again, it's easier to do that when you understand where you might struggle.
All right, folks.
I think Maria José had something else to offer here. Maria José, final thoughts?
Okay.
I said mine.
We'll see you in 2 weeks, folks. Thanks for listening.